From the WATE.com Digital Center, answering your legal questions, this is Ask Isaacs. Now, here's Lori Tucker and attorney Greg Isaacs.
For joining us today. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. Greg, good to see you.
Well, it's good to be here.
Let's talk about a new political primary law here in Tennessee. And at the crux of it is this question. What does it mean to be a bona fide political party member, and who gets to decide that? So explain what this new law is.
Well, it all begins and ends with crossover voting in primaries. And that means if you are a Democrat and you want to support a candidate that you're enamored with and want to vote in the Republican primary, under this new law, it is a huge no-no.
And that's always been a huge deal. There are so many people who say, how many times have we heard, I don't want to vote party, I want to vote the person.
It's the person, not the party.
Yes.
Well, in Tennessee, that old adage goes out the window. And let's kind of break down the law. Now, at the polling places in the primary elections, there's required to be an 8.5 by 11-foot sign that says if you are not, now here's some magic words, Lori, a bona fide member of this political party or affiliated or declare your allegiance, it is a crime to vote.
Against whatever party you're in. So, who determines what a bona fide political voter is?
And let's turn to the law.
Is there an entity?
As we often do on Ask Isaacs
Yes.
and in court like this morning, and you look to see what the legislature has defined a term or made the law, and the term bona fide in Tennessee is defined as, it's not defined.
Okay.
So we don't know. Second, affiliated with or declare allegiance likewise is not defined. So, you know, the constitutional problem, and actually these plaintiffs should be applauded, let's just say you get up and you've watched too much news. You've overdosed.
Is there such a thing?
National news.
Okay.
Let's
clarify
watch the
that.
local news. And you say, I am now going to be a Republican as opposed to a Democrat, or I'm going to be a Democrat as opposed to a Republican, and I'm going to march down to the city-county building, and I'm going to exercise my constitutional right to vote in that election, and somebody looks at you and says, I'm sorry, Ms. Tucker, you don't look bona fide to me. And then, now here's the
It just
upswing of that.
sounds so unreal.
It sounds surreal. And what the consequences are, and the law is unclear because it cites two statutes. One is a misdemeanor, which is kind of a slap on the wrist, but the other is a Class D felony.
What?
Which says it's a felony which carries 2 to 4 years for a person to register to vote in any manner in which the person is not entitled to vote.
So you could go to jail if you vote against your party lines. If you make that crossover.
If you cross over under the statute. But the thing is, let's just say I want to declare my allegiance. Is there going to be a party police there that's going to make you swear your hand on the elephant or the donkey and raise your right hand before you
How
pull the
would
lever?
you enforce this?
Yeah, or your intent. Let's just say you voted in the primary and then you walked out and you had an epiphany and you went, you know, I changed parties and I saw a sign and I changed right back. It's absurd.
And what does this say about where we are right now? Isn't this a little scary?
Well, what it says is, and here's the crux of this lawsuit aside from the constitutional issues, this the constitutional morass it's created. It's designed to deter voters. And you know,
Why though? What would be the point of that?
Because
Don't
you
you
want
want
to
people to
protect your
vote?
majority if you're the
Well,
majority.
And okay, so
yeah.
let's say this. Republicans came up with this. The vote was pretty much along party lines with very few exceptions because they didn't want that crossover, like you said. But still.
But you know, the beautiful part about this lawsuit is it's not whether you're an R or a D, it's that you're trying to deter someone voting for the person as opposed to the party. And, you know, it really has sent constitutional shockwaves.
Yeah, and let's go to the Constitution. Like, how could this have any merit?
Well, first of all, you know, Tennessee, we need to not discourage voting. We need to
Right.
encourage voting because we are the 46th state in voter turnout in the United States.
It's always light. We know this.
And, you know,
Or often light.
and it's interesting
not
when
always.
we see laws and debates on voter fraud.
Mm-hmm.
2016, we led the nation in bona fide. We'll use that term.
Oh, goodness.
Voter fraud. Now think about this: 4.3 million people voted in Tennessee, and in leading the nation, there were 40 proven instances of voter fraud, which is less than 0.05%.
Wow.
Knox
Yeah,
County
it wasn't here.
Knox County has not reported a single instance of voter fraud to the Knox County Attorney General's office since 2020. The last person that was prosecuted, we won't mention his name, was acquitted.
Right.
So Victor Ashe, Phil Lawson, and the League of Women Voters have filed a federal lawsuit, which we just happen to have here.
You have it right here. You have the paperwork as we speak. And Victor Ashe is our former Knoxville mayor,
Former ambassador.
to Poland. Let's talk about him. We have not brought him up, obviously, until now. Let's talk about what this means for him to get involved in something like this.
Well, I think it's very significant when you see a former mayor of the city of Knoxville, a former presidential appointee by the Bushes, ambassador to Poland, somebody who is currently a columnist for the Knoxville News Sentinel.
And that's where we read some of his comments where he said, hey, I'm worried about something happening to my vote, because he often criticizes fellow Republicans in his op-eds.
Right, and again, it's interesting that one of the key, if not the key plaintiff that's suing the Secretary of State Trey Hargett, suing Mark Goins, the Tennessee Coordinator of Elections, suing the Tennessee Attorney General, is a lifelong Republican, and he's suing a law or asking for a law to be declared unconstitutional that was promulgated and passed by his own party.
Right. So what do you think is going to happen? What would be the most logical scenario, even though this, many say, is not a logical law?
Well, let's talk about it. Constitutionally, we always say ignorance of the law is not an excuse. But the U.S. Supreme Court in Granted versus City of Rockwood, not Rockwood, Tennessee, but they said a law to be constitutional must put a reasonable person on notice of the prohibited conduct.
Okay.
So, in this case, the plaintiffs allege that there is not reasonable notice of what being a bona fide member of a party is, what declaring your allegiance to a party means at the polling place in real time, or being affiliated with such a party. The other issue that they raise is very powerful. Likewise, is it violates our First Amendment rights
Correct.
for political speech.
Yes.
And
Our
we
right
have
to
fought
vote.
wars beginning when King George was here about our right to exercise our political speech, our right to dissent, our right to gather. One of the most fundamental rights that we have. And this complaint very articulately states that it violates that.
Why would then a group get together and say, let's make this a law? How could that be allowed to get as far as it did, given everything you just said? What does that say?
I guess, as the way the Italian prince framed it centuries ago, absolute power corrupts and absolute power absolutely corrupts. I mean, basically it's to discourage people from manipulating outcomes that aren't a member of a party. So if you are the person that is genuine, and in this day and time, I find it difficult. To me, candidates are becoming the person, not the party, and we see it in local elections here in the city, in the county, and nationally. The sad part with this is you can't vote for the person. You've got to vote for a party.
Right.
So
A lot of people have always had a problem with that.
They have. And, the interesting thing, too, that this complaint addresses is the threat of criminal prosecution.
Right.
So you've criminalized crossover voting when the only instances, and these are the serious felony, a Class D, 2 to 4 years. I mean, the year that we led the nation, 0.05% of the votes cast in Tennessee were fraudulent. So what the question is, and I think Victor Ashe, I think Phil Lawson, another respected member of the community, the League of Women Voters are saying, enough is enough. We don't need to intimidate voters. We need to encourage voters.
Encourage voters to
because
come.
we're the 46th. So
Right.
instead of prohibiting crossover voting, let's be a better candidate, whether you're an R or a D. But let's not violate the Constitution or scare or intimidate people. And this is not the first time that my friend Trey Hargett has been sued over election fraud.
True.
So.
But I have this mental image in my head of an 80-year-old voter who's voted every election and decides, you know what, I'm gonna vote for that person, and then being hauled off to jail. That's the ultimate worst case scenario for this voter. But that could happen.
If the law,
If it
as Alice in
stands.
Wonderland said when she looked at when the Mad Hatter looked at her when she was in Neverland, words mean what I say they mean. When she was asked to explain Jabberwocky. I mean, if words mean what the legislature says, if you're an R and you vote in the D primary, or if you're a D and you vote in the R
You're
primary,
in trouble.
You're in big trouble.
Wow.
Now
Lots of quotes from you today, by the way.
I'm trying to do my best for you.
Thank you.
But here's the other practical issue. If I am one of the elected district attorneys in the state of Tennessee, I would have to think twice before I would have a citizen arrested, fingerprint, and face the deprivation of their liberty over whether I could prove whether they were bona fide, they had declared their allegiance, or otherwise were affiliated. So,
What's going to happen with this? I mean, from your legal perspective, what do you see happening here?
if I were going to make a prediction, and I rarely do,
I know you do, but I have to ask you every time.
I would say that the United States District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee would be very hard pressed not to find this statute unconstitutionally overbroad and vague. I'm really surprised and shocked that our Tennessee legislature drafted and passed a statute knowing there was no definition of the term bona fide or affiliated with.
And what does this say to the rest of the country?
It says, here we go again, Tennessee, passing some ludicrous bills. But the other thing is, Lori, and you touched on it at the beginning, who do you call if you're the district attorney and say, can you tell me if this person is a bona fide Republican or Democrat, or were they affiliated? Can you do some research? Right. I mean, do we have now election police, kind of like they did in Nazi Germany, and say, aha, I spoke with someone and I saw him at a meeting?
That's what makes this scary.
Yeah, and when I give fundraisers at my home, I mean, typically, depending on the candidate, there are checks that flow from people that are affiliated with both parties, and if they would have expressed that intent to help by voting in a primary, they would be facing jail time. So this is serious stuff.
It is.
What
do you think a timeline will be on this?
Well, an excellent question. What happens in federal court? There's a certain period of time for these individuals, Trey Hargett, Mark Goins, the Tennessee Attorney General, Skermetti, to file an answer. Then the court sets a scheduling order where the parties engage in discovery. Then they exchange evidence, and then it's set for trial. So it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out in federal court. Although it's open, the media is allowed to be there. You do not have cameras in the courtroom. But a very interesting situation where we have tried to criminalize crossover voting. You've got to vote for the party, not the person. And we are number 46th and it looks like we're trying our darndest to be number 50. Because we're doing everything in our power to deter people from voting. Because think about this, the time it takes to take off work, to go down to a polling place, to wait in line, and then you're sitting there, someone had knocked on your door and said, Ms. Tucker, I really would appreciate your vote. And then you look and you see a sign that says, God, I may go to jail.
After proudly exercising, we all feel a surge of pride and patriotism when we vote, and just
Well, and you know,
trying
the
to
stickers
disable
in
that process.
early voting that you put on your lapel or your dress
Yes.
that says "I've voted,"
Yeah.
that we get here in Knox County, I guess it should say "I declared" or "I'm bona fide."
Oh goodness.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but I do not think this will pass constitutional muster. But I think Victor Ashe should be applauded for taking this stand. And again, it's not a partisan stand. It's a lawsuit to protect the rights of the voters.
There you go. All right. Of course, we'll be watching this, and we will be talking more about this coming up at 5:30 tonight. Looking
Great.
forward to that.
I'll be here.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for being with us.